Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Think Like a Hacker, Act Like a Pro, Real-World Security Tips for Health Clinics. My name is Damien Adler, and I am one of the co-founders here at Zanda and head of customer success. Previously, well, actually, I am still a registered psychologist, but previously I developed and ran a group psychology private practice. And I'll hand over to my co-host today, Paul, for you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Damien. Yes, I'm Paul Adler. Actually, we're brothers, and yeah, on the other half of the co-founding of Zanda. I'm an engineer by sort of background and profession, and prior to founding Zanda over 15 years ago, I had a technology advisory company. We help businesses implement and run technology well.
Very good. Thank you, Paul. Okay, today we are going to look at a range of things, basically covering security and practical things that you can do in your practice that help keep your data secure, help keep your practice safe and secure. We're going to touch on it from a sort of psychology point of view and look at some of the ways in which people try and manipulate from a psychological perspective as well as a technology perspective. And we'll touch a little bit on some of Zanda's security features as well. But for the bulk of this, we're really going to be talking about practical things that you can do that really help keep your practice safe and secure and help keep your staff aware of what they need to be thinking about when it comes to security. So why does it matter? Kind of obvious question, but we want to touch on it anyway. This webinar today is really for practice owners, managers, and team members. So you'll see in there, this is not designed for specialist IT people or anything like that. This is very much designed for the real world and for people running small practices all the way up to large clinics. The threat landscape, is changing and it's rising every day. So this is a very sort of dynamic space, and we thought it's a good time for us to really give a bit of an update of sort of the current ways people are, do attempt to get around security and things that look at what can go wrong and how to protect yourself against that. And of course, why this is worthwhile? Well, we know that in the health space, we are dealing with very sensitive, private information, and that our patients trust us to look after that, information. And it's something that, is critical in every element of health. And the relationship with our clients and patients relies on us being able to protect that information and people kind of having confidence in our ability to do that. And that really goes at every layer of an organization, not just for practitioners, but for admin team members and anyone else that actually needs to handle and is responsible for managing practice information and treatment information. So looking at the landscape here that we operate in, and I won't go through the ins and outs of each of these regulations, other than to say that we operate across multiple jurisdictions, so that's Zanda, and we need to comply with different privacy and security frameworks from around the world. And what's really fantastic about that for our customers, no matter where you are, is that we have to comply with the strictest standard of any jurisdiction that we operate in. So it's interesting, buddy, in some ways, Australia has stricter regulations in some areas. In other ways, the European area has higher standards and requirements. And then with some things with Canada and the USA. Might have areas that they're particularly strong on. And one of the things that's great about working across all those jurisdictions is that we have to raise our security and our privacy approach to meet the highest standards wherever they are in the world. Now, we actually have to comply with a lot more than we have on the screen here, but we just want to give you a bit of an idea of the sort of broad brush regulations that we will be sort of talking a little bit about today, but really looking at the practical side of this. What does that mean in practice for practitioners? Okay, so we'll dive right in, and Paul, we're going to talk a bit about this idea of keeping your practice safe, and we've got this analogy here around locking your doors and windows. So I'll hand over to you to sort of take us through that and explain how this is a helpful analogy when we're thinking about
Yeah,
practice
indeed.
data.
Yeah. what we're going to share today is we're not going to be talking about implementing fancy and expensive firewalls or throw out all of your computers and things. We're not going to be talking about sort of complicated security. It's actually most of the issues and incidents and security breaches that happen are actually quite simple. It's not really very high tech governments hacking in or all these. It's not high tech stuff. And the idea and why I particularly like this house analogy. It's very much like when you leave your house. Yes, we always shut and lock the front door. But when you leave the house, if you just lock the front door but leave your garage door open or leave all your windows open, then the front door is not very useful, and it's not going to help keep your house very secure. So it's really important. You're only as strong as the weakest link, and it's really important when you think about security in your practice that you think about all of the different sort of areas, and think about it like a house. When you leave that house, it's we lock all the doors, including the back door. We lock the windows, shut the windows and lock them. And it's a very simple little thing, but it's the same sort of concept for keeping your practice or your business secure.
Yeah, I think it's a good, and I think the other dimension to the analogy I like is that you could have the highest grade locks, right, and the best sort of alarm system, right? But if you
Yes.
put the key under the front mat, right, it doesn't matter. That high grade lock does not help. And if you've got your alarm code on a sticky note next to your alarm pad in your house, right, it doesn't matter
Yep.
how good that security is. Someone can come in and bang, it's right there. And it's very much like that with the technology that we use, and a lot of technology providers will use to make sure there's absolute highest grade security. But it's often the common easy things, right, that can really kind of bring you undone.
Yeah, you wouldn't
So
have the
we,
same key as all of your neighbors.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you wouldn't leave lock 2 windows but leave 10 open. It's the same thing with keeping your practice and information secure, that you're
yeah,
only as strong as the weakest link. And what we're going to show is some just simple, practical little tips, literally like locking your front door, keeping your key, having a key, not leaving it under the doormat, not leaving the alarm code if you have an alarm, not leaving the alarm code on a sticky note next to it. Just simple little tips that'll help you
absolutely.
make your business more secure.
And that sort of brings us into this kind of the common risks in practice settings. So you want to take us through these, Paul, because these are really these common things we're talking about. This is the equivalent of leaving the window open. So
Yeah.
what are these? Do you want to walk us through each of these?
Yeah. So,
Explain what they
so the
are.
most
Yeah.
common risk, and the way in which information can be hacked or accessed is via human error. And I'm not going to dwell on that now, but we're going to show you a few little things about that. The sort of phishing and social engineering, we're going to talk about that and give some examples, including one that happened, like an email that we received not very long ago. Then, things like having a weak password, sharing a login, third party, like other software that you might have installed on your system, or that you might have signed up to on the web. There's risks associated with that. And the last point, sort of just, I guess, not having like knowledge about what users are doing in your business or with your software.
Yeah. So let's, on that note, jump into
Yeah.
this idea of what a sort of phishing email is, and kind of what the goal is when people send these. So what are people aiming at here? Like, what are they trying to do when they send phishing emails?
They're usually trying to get you to to trick you and to impersonate and make you believe that they're somebody else, a legitimate site that maybe perhaps your bank, or they could try to trick you into thinking that you're some other some other software and get you to click on that link and to log in with your credentials into their system. That's usually the most common objective of it. They could also be trying to, sometimes there's payment type requests as well. So they could be trying to get you to send a payment, trick you into thinking that, oh, there's, say, for example, an invoice that needs to be paid, and you should send the money, you should pay it and send the money to them.
Yeah.
But they're pretty sophisticated in the way they go about it, and it's very easy to be misled.
Yeah. And the other thing, when people collect this information, sometimes they'll exploit it directly. So they'll grab that and they will grab like credit card information and they'll directly use that to make purchases. Other types of schemes will aim to collect all that information and then they sell that. So they'll sell it on the dark web to people that will then exploit it. So there's going rates essentially for current recent credit card details that have been stolen, and each viable card has a certain dollar value. So depending on what the goal is of the person, but sometimes they're directly going to exploit it. Sometimes they're going to package that information up and then sell it. So what are the signs, Paul, to look out for here with a phishing email? What are the giveaways?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is sort of like trying to create a sense of urgency. They want you to not think about it too much, and to quite to act on it fast, and therefore maybe you feel like there's not enough time to check this out. I need to pay this right now, or that you've been hacked and you need to sort of do this sort of emergency fix right away. Other things, so asking you to log in, so asking you to perhaps sort of click on an attachment or a link that might be in an email. The other thing I guess that you can sort of notice is that there can be often little variations in the way that words are spelled. So in that little example there, if you look carefully at it, and I had to look very carefully at that there, you'll notice that PayPal has a 1 instead of an L. And sometimes they're that they might not know some personal information about you. So instead of saying send an email and hi Damien, they will say something generic.
Yeah. And then you just know something's a bit off because you think that provider should know my details. For instance, like your bank will definitely know who you are, right? So unlikely, they're going to send something like that without.
It's also really looking carefully at who the sender is. If you sort of they might sort of say that it's this bank, but if you actually expand it out and look at the email address in there, you'll see that it's not the bank's email address, or it's a generic looking email address. And you just I guess a combination of those things should definitely raise your alert.
Okay. Let's look at a sort of a real example here. So this is you'll take us through it, Paul, because this is a real thing that happens, right?
This is real. So it actually it came through. This was received very recently, and if you look carefully at it, so it's a request coming to our accounts department, and it's an internal request to please pay an attached invoice now. And notice that it says here, please set up the vendor and make payment. So they're sort of knowing that we wouldn't have them on file already. And look at what they've done. They've even made it look like it's been forwarded, that the owner has forwarded the email to our accounts department. And it's the details of this here. It's meeting all of those sort of criteria. It should really set off, and it did set off alarm bells, because it was, it's really important. It's this invoice has not been paid. There's still an unpaid invoice. Here's the number. Please give the setting. Is it? What does it say? The settling of this invoice top priority. So it's that sort of sense of urgency, but there's something sort of familiar about it. It is being sent to one of our addresses, but the supplier is not someone that we, this is a genuine phishing email that came into our email system.
Yeah. And I think that this is the we won't give away how we also there's a few, like, internally we have ways of setting up vendors and things to ensure that they are legitimate, but we see these sorts of things happen that um, where and it's important to make sure your internal processes, right? Like if you're used to forwarding your bills to
Mm.
maybe a practice manager or someone to sort out payment, or perhaps you're the recipient, of those, just to make sure that, or be aware that these things can be exploited, right? And that you've got another way, another channel of verifying, right, that you never would set up and take action based on an email alone, because that can be easily exploited. If we go to another example to here, so if we look at this credential phishing example, so do you want to take us through that, Paul? So what are they trying to do here?
Yeah, so they're sending a message, actually sort of trying, like, purporting to sort of be protecting you because of the unusual sign-on activity that they've detected. And but actually, this is a phishing attempt. So if you notice that, there's a few things to look at, like, so it's purporting to come from Microsoft, and look at, like, it says Microsoft Team, so that'll could be what they use. But if you actually have a look at the email address on the right-hand side, you can see that there's no way Microsoft would send a message like with that type of email address.
Yeah.
And the other thing as well is, note that there's have a look at any links that have been included in the emails, and have a look and sort of see if the domain names look legitimate. One thing, we've got a comment in here, like, about not clicking on the emails, or sorry, links in the email. And the reason for that is that, and the suggestion is to hover, and it's really good advice, because often there's a little code at the end of that link, and when you click on that link, they know that code links back to the email that they've sent you, and they know that you definitely received that email and you clicked on the link. They know you're a sort of a real person, and then they can keep trying you again. So yeah, don't click on the links, because they then know that, yes, okay, this is a legitimate, there's a person here who we can send more stuff to.
Yeah.
And try and
And
catch
they
them
might
out
then
another
send
way.
a follow-up, right? They might send a follow-up and say, "Hey, we noticed you haven't completed the reset process. Please complete this for the next 3 hours, or your account will be, like, deleted," right?
Cancelled.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then it feels like, well, they know that I haven't completed that, and I did click on it, and it can add to this sense of, like, the legitimacy, urgency, and it can sort of play right into that risk that you act on it. And I
And
think
maybe
the thing,
you've got a shared email, like shared support email box, right? And there's, one person looks at it, then another person looks at it, and like, the second person perhaps does go in and click through and does enter
exactly.
their details in.
And very common for clinics, they'll have one incoming email address, like reception at my health practice, and you've got different people on at different times potentially, and that's exactly that type of risk. And that the other point I was going to make is that if you're listening to this and thinking, "Oh, I already know that," right? The question to ask yourself is, does your team know that? Right? Does your latest person you hired know that? Does your new admin person know that? And it's really important that you have a way of sort of educating, or you can get them. We'll send a link out to this webinar, but just have people be aware that these are the sorts of things to kind of to look out for. Okay, let's move on to social engineering, and this is a different sort of modality, often trying to achieve the same sorts of goals. But this is sort of using sort of social engineering and the kind of psychology of interaction and knowing what are the kind of vulnerabilities in processes, right? So often it's more about the process and the people element than it is necessarily around the technology. So engineering says when they manipulate people, to give up confidential information, and often without kind of realizing it. And you see the kind of things that pop up as, fake IT support, impersonating patients or staff, and use the same sorts of things like urgency, fear, like sympathy or authority. And we are going to run through, a couple of examples of this to sort of show what that can kind of look like, because this sort of stuff, it happens, right? It happens in the real world, and we see it, like, because we have thousands and thousands of practices that use Xanda like all over the world. We get to see what's happening in different areas, and we see these sorts of things that it's really good to be aware of it. So the first one, this example here, so you get someone potentially calling. They might call into the practice, right? And they might claim that they are from some sort of health industry directory or registration board or something, and ask to say, look, we are just updating your information, or we're updating all information for the practitioners in your in your clinic, right? And they might start then by giving some information that's publicly available that they know, which will add to a sense of legitimacy, right? So they might say, hey, we know we've got this name, there's this profession, this is the address, is that right? This is the phone number, yes, okay. Look, we are missing their registration number, their date of birth, something else, right? So they get the confidence by showing they already have some information, and then can sort of make it sound, a lot more legitimate. And the admin person on the receiving end of that phone call is likely busy, wants to help, and wants to sort of provide that information. And the interesting thing about these kind of social engineering attempts is that when the sort of sense of authority or the sense of kind of confidence that the caller projects often sets the kind of frame of how the person receiving that call feels. So let's move to this second example, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. So in this example, we've got a scenario where a receptionist receives a call from someone claiming to be a general practitioner or a physician, right? And the caller sort of says that perhaps a shared patient like has just arrived, and they're in a distressed state, and they need some urgent information about the latest, or the latest treatment records, or the latest sessions, right? They might even say that the patient's arrived in a suicidal state or something, to create the sense of like a medical or psychological emergency, and use that pressure and that kind of authority of a doctor from this clinic to sort of provide that information. And it's very easy for a clinic, a receptionist, to get kind of flustered, right? And to feel that if they withhold that information, that they're going to be doing something that's going to be harmful to the patient. So it kind of plays in with that kind of authority and that sort of desire, to help. And then again, playing on that authority is just an interesting example I had when I first started working in the hospital system. So I used to work in public psychiatry. And very often we'd have patients that would come in, and we would need to get information from the general practitioner. And often it was sort of urgent, and we did have a legitimate right to access that information, or to at least request it, I should say. Now, when I first started, I was a new practitioner, wasn't confident in my role, wasn't sure if the receptionist was going to give me the information. So I kind of go into it kind of half stuttering, like asking, "Oh, could I please like have this information," and whatnot. And almost universally, right, I'd get turned down. Like they'd say, "No, this is the process. We can't hand that out over the phone." But then I noticed that some colleagues that had been there for a lot longer were getting on the phone and getting this information straight away. Right. And I was like, they don't, like, what is it different that they were doing? And I realized that it was the using an authoritative, confident voice. Right. So I changed the approach when I'd ring up for that information and say, "This is who I am. I know this patient sees this doctor." So I'd give some information and say, "I need this, this, and this, and it's urgent." Right. And be really kind of short, direct, and make a very clear, confident request, right? And amazing, I would get information 9 times out of 10, right? And there was no difference. Like they had no better reason to trust that I was where I said I was from, than when I first started. But just that approach makes a difference. So just being mindful that the people answering your phone, if it's not you, that they're going to want to help. They're going to want to, foster good relationships with GPs and anyone we work with. And there is that risk that can be exploited by just leveraging that. So be mindful. And of course, the way to address this is that you can take that, but you might want to then call back instead of providing information over the phone. You might want to call back on the legitimate number that is registered publicly for that GP, verify the request, verify the consents, so forth. But do it in a different channel than the one just that you received an incoming call, about. So, very good. Okay, we will move on to looking at sort of system level protections, and I'm going to hand over to you, Paul, to run us through these. What are we talking about here at system level protections?
So we're talking about some pretty simple but really important and often overlooked measures that you can take which will significantly improve the level of security inside your practice. So the most important thing is enabling 2FA. So that's when you get asked to put the code in, or and maybe the code generated from your mobile phone or some other separate code that's used in addition to your password. And that can also include passkeys, which are something that's sort of being gradually implemented. And so enabling that, particularly 2FA on all of your important systems, including Zanda, that significantly helps. So that, and the way that it helps is that if somehow your password is breached, somehow someone's guessed your password or you've reused the password elsewhere, then that means that someone won't be able to get in because they need another piece of information. They need, a code generated from your phone. And we know, I know they're annoying. Right?
I was just going to say, it's annoying, right?
Ultra annoying, right? And
yeah,
I and a lot of other people have thought hard about how you can make it less annoying, because it is such a good method. And yeah, I'm hopeful that there'll be improvements, broadly, but for now, it's the best thing.
Yeah.
The next thing is having having strong passwords, so they've got to be longish, sort of 10 plus characters is good, longer is better. And the other thing that's super important is that it's unique. So that password is not used anywhere else. And I guess the way in which, trying to remember these long, unique passwords, it's impossible. So that's why you need a password manager, which kind of sounds counterintuitive, like all your passwords being kept in something, written down, that's essentially what's happening with a password manager. But these are dedicated systems meant for storing passwords, and that a good one, no one can get into them. They're encrypted in such a way that not even the IT people who work there can get into it. In our case, at Zanda, the passwords at Zanda are encrypted in a way that there is no known way to get those passwords. Not us, nobody. And so it's having the unique passwords is really important, because although companies like Zanda have good ways of encrypting it, and there is no known way to get the password, other companies may not have that same level of system and approach, and so they may store, or they can store the passwords in a way where it's possible for it to be hacked. And then once people find the password, then they can reattempt it in other systems, such as your email system or your bank system or whatever. So make sure you keep them unique and store them in a password manager. So Apple has one. There's other ones like Bitwarden, 1Password, LastPass. There's a few of them, and it's well worth using them.
Yeah.
And then the other thing as well is just restricting who can install software on your computers, because someone could be sort of tricked into installing some software which could then divulge the password, could sort of capture the password as you key it in and then send that on to them, and then they can get into, then they know your username and your password.
Yeah.
And just tying that back to the very first point, if they know your username and your password, but they don't have access to your phone because you're using 2FA, well, they still can't get in. So that's why all of those things are really important, but that's why we've got the 2FA enabling that as the highest priority. And I know it's had a hassle, but enabling that is a really good measure to keep everything secure.
I think the other dimension, and this is again, if you've got just to think about the different people in your practice, but when I've been talking to people that I would consider complacent around password management and using unique passwords, is they have a thought of what are the odds, right, that someone's targeting me, right, and that they're going to like individually get my username and password and try it somewhere else. And the thing to understand about this is that these are large scale attempts, right? This is not necessarily someone sitting down thinking about you, but the way that this kind of works, right, is that there will be a data breach of some other system, and as you were saying, Paul, like it might be a system that does not store the passwords uniquely, right? So they will get the username, securely. Yeah, maybe they don't encrypt it, right? So you find the weakest system that gets exploited, right? And you've entered at some point, right? You've logged in and you've registered an account with some random company, and you've put in your email address and your password, right? Now, if you've reused those, right, in all your other systems, what happens is just one of those needs to be breached, right? People then get a hold of that username and password, and they attempt that combination in thousands and thousands and thousands of different websites and other services, right? Because it's automated, right? So they just need to get that. And so they will try that combination on lots and lots of things. Every known bank, every known thing you can think of, doing bang,
Email
bang, bang, bang,
provider.
and try it. Yeah, email provider, exactly, right. And so once they get a hit, it's not someone individually looking at that. That hit then just gets put into a list that, okay, these are all the ones that we know we can access with this, like this combination. These are all the accounts that we can access with that. And then they can either exploit it or sell it. Right. So it's done at a very large scale. And when I'm talking to people sometimes about this, they're like, oh, no one's, worried about what I'm doing. And right. But just be mindful that this is it's automated and it's done at a mass scale. So by having that unique combination, it means that even if one system like that is breached, that combination of username and password you haven't used that anywhere else. So when they attempt it on thousands and thousands of other sites and things, it's not going to work. Right. And so the breach will be limited to that one dodgy company that didn't have good, security. Fine, but at least it doesn't contaminate across, everywhere else.
If you can get everyone like in your practice to do one thing, it would be have a very strong, unique password for your email, and also please do it on Zanda.
Exactly. Yeah, unique. Totally. Okay, now let's move on to device and the sort of physical security around these things.
Sure. Yeah. So there's some really simple things. So yeah, obviously, like just making sure that if because if someone physically can get hold of your like computer and your phone, for example, if you're using 2FA, then that's a risk, right? So making sure that you've got password protected screensavers and a phone lock. That simple, obvious, but just imagine someone like the big risk. Someone comes in and steals it, and it's a pretty simple, common thing to happen. It's not like that obscure. Imagine someone comes in and steals it, then how are you going to be protected? So a screensaver and a phone, and needing some sort of code, Face ID or some PIN number to access your phone. Perfect. You can secure this sort of locking systems to secure it to the desks, which is useful, sort of especially in a reception environment, for example, where someone may be opportunistic and just grab it. It'll just prevent that from happening. There's some simple tools as well that you can get. They're not very expensive, but that will allow you to remotely lock computers and also even destroy so remotely lock down, like no one can use the computer anymore. And you can destroy the data that's on there as well. So that's another measure. We use some tools, and they're not very expensive, like maybe $20 a year or something. We use some tools internally that allow us to do that. Also, it's really important, just a simple thing around like just printers, and if you've got physical filing cabinets or anything, just not having them in public areas, that can help mitigate obvious risks there. And yeah, like, an old one, but really important, making sure that the Wi-Fi network's password protected uh, and private.
Yeah. And also be mindful if you still have a physically wired in internet
Yeah,
or a network in your reception or waiting room. People often reconfigure their waiting room reception.
yeah,
They leave like a plug in the wall that's that is still wired to their central network, that someone can just put in a device into that, and if there's no security on that, or if it is connected through to their network, they've got access. So I always, when I go into waiting rooms, I always spot that now, like sort of this occupational hazard of scrolling and scanning these sorts of
mm.
things.
And
Okay.
just one other thing I was
Yeah.
going to say on that there was just around making sure that it's a simple thing, but making sure the hard drive is encrypted. If you are storing any files on there, which these days not that many people are, they're uploading it to the cloud and systems like Zanda. But the encrypting the hard drive, it's just a checkbox usually, and it means that if your machine's stolen, someone can't just pull the hard drive out and read it. If
Yeah.
it's not encrypted, people can do that easily.
Yeah.
Real easily.
Yeah. And like literally just plug it in to
Yep.
take it out. You plug it in. You can get a plug that plugs the hard drive
Yeah.
straight into any device, into a USB, and
Yes.
away you go.
Yeah.
You've
Just
got
start
access
reading
to.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, so let's
Um,
move on to sort of staff awareness and security culture. And we've talked a bit about this, but we have this sort of approach in Xander, right? So we thought it'd be worth perhaps you taking us through just a few things that people can do for their clinics and what they should be keeping in mind.
yeah. Like we have in one of those earlier slides, we just talked about all the different security and privacy standards that we comply with, and a lot of that's externally audited. We have a whole process of managing our compliance, and when we have annual audits and whatnot that are done. But a key part of those programs, I think, talking like ISO 27001 and HIPAA, a key part of that is around the sort of security culture within the organisation, and making sure that people are really aware of security and are thinking about it and conscious of it. And the most important part of that is about talking about it, and in a sense, like that's kind of what we're doing right now. Like this is not a plug for Xander. This is about just how to keep your system secure, and so talking about it regularly. So those examples, for example, that we showed around the phishing emails, they were shared internally, and comment. We shared, commented, shared as widely as we could internally, and we do that on anything that we see or learn about, or media coverage, for example, of hacks that have occurred elsewhere and in other systems and things. We share that, irrespective of whether it's related to anything connected to, or in any way sort of possibly linked to healthcare or anything like that. We share it and just raise people's awareness around the sort of incidence of security. So how often it happens, and the way it happens. So that's really just very, very simple things that you can do, and to make sure that just to get people thinking, oh, hang on, that's a weird email, or that's a weird phone call. Maybe I should just stop and ask or think about it a bit more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, sorry, Dan.
No, I was just going to say that we become more aware when we see examples of it happening. So that kind of, it's not about kind of making people anxious or anything, but just being like,
No,
hey, this is what happened and how it happened. So it just makes people alert. And
yeah, we're part of a
rather,
connected world. Anyone can email you, and you can have a good email system. We use Google Workspace internally in here, but like they let that phishing email come through. Some of them
yeah,
they don't let through and treat as spam, but yeah, not all. And yeah, making like uh, having a sort of a culture and awareness within the business, within your practice, across all the team members. That's really one of the best things that you can do.
that'll make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a couple of other things as well, like I guess making sure that your team know that their actions are logged. Now, I'll say that and it uses like what we have inside Zanda as an example. Everything that's done there is recorded by automatically recorded by the system, and you can go into the activity log and you can see that yourself. Like, you created this appointment, you moved it, you changed the time, you did this, you updated the name, and it's all recorded. So there's there's a log of all the action that's happened, which is really important for helping diagnose issues, but also it's got a really important security element to it that every time something was viewed, there's a record of it. And the other thing as well, I guess where it's appropriate, we do it for all of our team members. We do police checks and security checks. So different jurisdictions and different types of practices may have different requirements, but that I guess sort of helps set the it can help in an obvious way, but it also helps set the tone that privacy and security is really important.
Yeah, and it's interesting, but in our experience over the years, there have been a number of circumstances where we're aware of
Yes.
customers that have had problems with team members, right? Where they have hired people, haven't done a background check, and then found that they've had, it can happen to anyone. Someone might have a problem with gambling or with something, right, that, affects them personally, and then they act really kind of out of character. And a police check, at least, you never want to think like the worst of people or anything like that, but just if it becomes part of a routine kind of process that everyone does that, then it can often, at least detect if there are issues. And in the circumstances we've been aware of where people have had issues with team members, and usually it's been around theft of money or doing things like that.
Or the patient list. They've rung you they rung us in a sort of a real frenzy of, I think that they've stolen, a whole lot of data.
Yeah.
And like the logging systems that I just talked about before, that provides evidence of that.
Absolutely. And the IP address in which, that was accessed. So it puts people in a very strong position to be able to say, this is what happened, this is who, this is the user, this is the location, the whole lot. So the simple things, as we sort of said at the start, but they really do kind of make a difference. So looking at moving on, looking at our sort of communication, with patients, just a few things to keep in mind, that making sure that when we are communicating or we are allowing appointments to be booked and things, that we're using kind of encrypted portals, that we're not collecting information via systems that actually aren't designed to collect information, health information, I should say. So one that's really important, for instance, is when you look on a website, and let's say WordPress or something, which is perfectly good platform to use for websites, but remember, they're not like designed to collect personal health information. And so we'll often see things like people might get a plugin that is some sort of form, right? That like a contact us form, which looks great, works well, but depending on how you configure that, that information can be not only sent through, of course, to the practice that you might intend, but often it's a tick box to save the form data on your web server, right? And often, the web servers that people are using for websites, and I won't use any names here, but they're often, very sort of cheap shared machines that are used and have some inherent sort of security vulnerabilities, which for most part, if it's just a standard website, is not going to be hugely problematic. But if you're actually storing patient information on those websites, or on those web servers, then that can become an issue. And we've certainly seen things that have popped up in the past, and it's just been a lack of awareness of how those web contact us forms work, and people don't realize that they are actually breaching a bunch of regulations around that, by simply ticking or unticking a box on WordPress. I'm not saying WordPress, but it actually applies to lots of others as well.
Yeah, and if that data becomes public, or or in the hands of the wrong people, then it's could be used, as like part of a blackmail program to extort, or sorry, extortion to extort money
Yeah.
from a clinic.
Yeah. And the sort of pathway that we see that happens. So people will often hire remote contractors, like to do
Yeah.
their web development or to configure some email stuff, right? They'll provide credentials, to their WordPress site, to their hosting environment, to get maybe someone that they get on a outsourcing kind of to log in and to
Mhm.
sort of make the change to the website, not realizing that they're providing credentials to a whole bunch of health information that's stored. And someone who knows what they're doing, you don't even have to look very far. You just have a look, contact us. Oh yeah, are they storing the data? Yep. And there's years worth of contact information, and where people might be putting their medical
Disclose.
information, uploading
Yeah.
referrals. The whole lot is there, and that then is suddenly being access has been provided to often a overseas based outsourced service provider that hasn't been vetted, right? So they're the sorts of things that we kind of see, and that you just need to be careful about. Um, so I think the broader thing there is just making sure that you're mindful of where you are collecting health information, making sure it's a device or a system that is intended for that use, because then they'll have or should have the right sort of security things in place. The other comment we've got here is around just separating out using your personal email and phone. It's good sort of security hygiene, if you like, to kind of try and keep things distinct. And when it's communication with patients, having messages and things coming from a consistent phone number rather than ones that are kind of changing, and making sure it's a one that's used professionally, just keeps it kind of clean. The same with personal emails. There's some sort of ethical reasons why that's a good thing to do anyway, as a lot of people will be aware. But from a security point of view, it's better that you're not putting your professional email details into every site that you sign up for to try something out in your personal life, to kind of keep it so you're not exposing your details out there. Just reduces the pathways that people can try and misuse that. Okay, so in terms of the way that we kind of approach security, and this I guess goes back to this idea of the psychology of it. It needs to be ongoing. So it might be that after you watch this webinar, it might raise your awareness and prompt you hopefully to have a talk to your team and make sure. But really where we get the kind of most benefit, right, is making sure that it's built into a regular range of practices that you do. So having some an annual kind of review of security for your practice, making sure that you do kind of rotate your passwords, that you're looking at the audit access, and making sure that you do sort of look at what people have access to your systems, and do they still all need it? Just like if you move into using the house analogy, right? When you move into a house, you typically change the locks, right? Because you don't want previous owners or tenants to have a set of keys. So it's the same, to make sure that you routinely review all the systems that you use, and make sure that you don't have former team members still there, or that the level of access that has been provided is suitable for the person's role. So maybe you elevated their access at one point because you were going on holidays and you wanted someone to be able to do certain things. Now you've come back from holidays, it's important to make sure that you then drop that access down again, so that you're not leaving that as an ongoing kind of security risk. And then monitoring things like industry bodies are great, making sure you subscribe to their emails and keep an eye, because they'll often really detect things that are happening, and then alert you to it. So it's a way of kind of keeping a constant information feed of what's happening out there that's relevant to your industry. And like anything, taking a sort of continuous improvement approach. So it's not a one and done, but an idea that you just incrementally keep working on improving your approach, improving your education programs that you have internally, and then over time things get better, rather than sort of let complacency sort of sneak back in.
Mm.
In terms of, I'll hand this
Yeah,
over to you, Paul. Yeah,
yeah.
on
I was just going to
yeah.
say, like, important software such as Zanda, email, for example, other systems that you might use that are really important to the operation of your business. I guess, yeah, they've got a really important role to keep, they provide an important purpose for your business. They hold really, data that's very important that doesn't get leaked out. So it's really important to choose to make good choices in those, in who you have for your sort of important pieces of technology. And I won't go through, like, I guess if anyone's really interested, you can have a look at that list there. Probably the like something that is really important, it's down the very bottom. So having externally audited systems, security systems, and two of the big examples are ISO 27001 and SOC 2. So they're they're somewhat similar, and it certainly means that independent experts have looked hard at the system and your processes, and if you've achieved that certification, then that a lot of the items that are listed above have been ticked off. Not all, but most of the key things, the really important things, have been ticked off in there. So, for example, having an external security company come and attempt to hack in to your system, so it's called a penetration test. That's a requirement, and we have that done once a year, and it's a requirement under those programs, ISO 27001 and SOC 2. So if a company's got that, then you can be quite confident that their security practices will be good.
And I think one other comment to make on that is to watch out for providers when that will try and kind of almost like borrow the credibility of to pretend that they have that level of security. So a good example might be that they say we use ISO 27001 cloud servers, right, and say therefore we are ISO, or the implication, they won't say it directly, but the implication is, well, therefore we're basically ISO 27001 certified. And that is overtly kind of misleading, because when you look at things like ISO 27001, yes, a lot of it, as we're talking about, is making sure that the way that the practice or the technology provider operates, right, that their practices comply, right? So just like if you like saying, oh yes, I have a house, right, with all the locks and fancy things, right, but no one, right, no one is actually being trained to lock the doors, and there's no processes to make sure everything's locked up tightly and it's routinely checked, right? So what you want to look for, and it's often a really big flag if you see people trying to borrow the credibility of these sort of audits based on their choice of technology partner. So we use, maybe Azure or Amazon or something, and say, therefore, they've got ISO, therefore it's like we have it. You want to look at, does the actual technology provider hold that certification themselves? And if they don't and are trying to sort of pretend that they do, then that's a really big flag, because it means that they're aware of what they should be doing, they're not doing it, and they're sort of deliberately kind of making claims that will mislead people that aren't sort of well versed in the space. Okay, let's to wrap it up. We've got just a quick slide here, and then we'll take us home. But just some quick reminders around secure use of Zanda. So just some really basic things that you can kind of check to make sure that everyone's got a unique, user account. We don't charge for additional user accounts, so we do that, on purpose, so everyone can have their own login and their own set of kind of credentials. Make sure you got 2FA activated. Again, what we were talking about before, limiting the access so you can customize exactly what people can see, what they can do. So auditing that periodically, just to make sure it makes sense for each person's role, that they have got access to the right information. There's a privacy mode that you can use if there's a risk of someone seeing your screen, so you can click a little button in the calendar, it's going to hide all the appointment details. So we've all had that situation where a patient or a client like leans over to look at the calendar because they're trying to find, like, oh, hey, what gap do you have? And there's that kind of tendency that, we'll both look at the calendar and find a spot, right? I'm sure most people have had that experience, and it's quite awkward. But if you've got that scenario, or you need to step out of the room for a second, and you've got your calendar in there, you can actually lock it, of course, or put that privacy on, and it's going to hide all the identifying information. Um, get rid of any unused accounts, and then, of course, run some periodic spot checks using the activity log, so you can actually just see, and you can filter by user and just check every now and again that what people are viewing, makes sense. That there isn't anything that kind of looks a little bit odd, and it's just a good practice to do. We all want to trust our staff, and 99% of the time, it's of course fine, but it's a good practice to do, and just see if anything kind of stands out as unusual. Anything else to add, Paul, from your side before we finish up?
No, no. Yeah, the unique accounts, like simple, obvious, tracks who's doing what, and yeah, we don't charge for it at all. And we ourselves use software where they do charge by the account, and it's really annoying. Security should not come at the expense of cost. And that's why we don't charge. So make as many user accounts as you have people that access it, and set up 2FA.
Absolutely. Good key take-home points. A couple of overt plugs and announcements here for Zanda. So some shameless plugs, but they are really useful things. We've got the AHA Ideas Board. So this is where, if you have, it's relatively new, this, and it's been a huge hit. But if you log into your account and go to the help menu, you'll see a submit an idea. When you go to that, it'll actually take you to a board where you can see all the different ideas that people are submitting, feature requests. You can comment on them. You can add votes to them. So if you see things that you think, oh, I really want that, you can add your vote to it, or you can add new ideas. So it's a really good way. We introduced this to be really kind of transparent about what people are asking for, to be able to give people a way of expressing and communicating with us. And then our product team, like, they are looking at this every day, and then every week it gets like a review. It feeds right into our roadmap. So that's awesome. Next plug.
We see an email, we see a summary every day of all the activity on the AHA Ideas boards, every comment and every suggestion that people have made. Come through to Damien and myself. So, and we look at that formally very regularly.
Yeah. It's sort of the success of Zanda, like, for those who've been with us for some time, that it's all based around listening to our customers, right, and developing the things that are going to make the biggest difference. And this is an extremely powerful tool for us to kind of keep in touch, and for you to be able to communicate directly with the product team and with us about what it is you're after.
And you can all see how popular an idea is, and that's what we're looking at as well. It's, I don't know how long we've had it in place for, but sort of several months, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's super. And we've made it too that you don't have to log in separately to that, because we wanted people to be able to just click through, so you can actually just go straight in and vote, and that will automatically track that it's come from you. And so we can follow up. Sometimes we have questions and think, okay, we're not quite sure about that feature or how you might use it, and our product team will reach out and get clarification. So we've tried to make it as low as friction as possible, so you can really be part of that evolution process for Zanda. We have the Zanda Academy. If you haven't visited that, really great place to be able to get the most out of Zanda, train new team members. So we have courses on there. It's fantastic. We've had really good feedback. Again, relatively new, but if you want to get people up to speed on using Zanda, new team members, or maybe existing team members that are familiar with the system, or you want to get more out of it, jump on there. And finally, last shameless plug, we have a practice management book coming out, The 9 Secrets of Successful Health Practices. So we've written a book really capturing some of the key themes that we can see that really are commonalities that lead to success in health practice management and growing. So really exciting. That is coming out in the not too distant future. So we are starting to let people know about that. If there's anything else we can help you with, we've got, you can contact us by a bunch of different ways. So you can jump on email, website. We've got live chat as well. And of course, there's also now the Practice Hive. So if you click on that little Hive icon at the very top menu of your Zanda account, you can actually go in there and you can see a whole bunch of things. And one of the things you can see is all the new releases that we put out. And we update this nearly every day when we're putting out things, so you can see what's new and what's happening in there. So lots of ways to get in contact and stay up to date. Well, thank you very much for joining. Thank you, Paul, for sharing your expertise with us and with the Zanda family today. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And do reach out if there's anything that we can help with.
Thank you.
Thank you.